Hello, friends, and welcome to What the Fringe, the podcast dedicated to all things Fringe theater. I'm your host, Lauren Hantz. Each week, I visit with a Fringe artist to hear all about their endeavors and gain insight into their process. This week, I am visiting with Josh Languedoc of Elon Muskrat. He speaks to slot machines. He's here with a chainsaw to cut you a deal. Elon Muskrat is selling his new casino, and you can be the lucky buyer. From storyteller Josh Languedoc, author of Rocco and Nakato, this show explores what floats on the surface of power and what hides beneath it.
Fringe is a great place to test stuff, and it's a great place to get noticed and get people's eyes on your work. I think it's the risk that intrigues me the most, particularly at the Edmonton Fringe. There's a very, very dedicated audience base. Like, people take days off work, a week off work to go and just hang out at the Fringe and see a bunch of shows. Maybe there's some childhood excitement there, because I remember when I was 18, I just was about to graduate high school, and I had a group of friends, and we're like, let's try writing a play together. Like, we feel ready to challenge ourselves that way and to collaborate. And the only thing we knew where we could do that at 17, 18 years old was the Edmonton Fringe. So like, we applied, got in, and Fringe has always been a place for me.
Josh Languedoc is a proud Anishinaabe member of the Saugeen First Nation and lives in the Treaty 6 territory as a playwright, producer, storyteller, director, and teacher. Since 2018, Josh has been touring his solo performance, Rocco and Nakato, Tales from the Land, to theaters and festivals all across Turtle Island. Some of Josh's other plays include The Creature in the Dark, Feast, Civil Blood, a treaty story, The Eyes of Spirits, and Incorrigible, The Legend of Thunder Voice. Josh teaches around the Edmonton, Canada area and runs the teen playwriting program Rites of Passage at Workshop West Playwrights Theatre. Directing credits include Talk Treaty to Me and Identity. As a producer, Josh has curated the Pehona series, The Heritage Village, Connections Collision Cabaret, and #ReconcileThis. You may have also seen Josh don a leather jacket as Sunny Boy in the Indigenous hit Bear Grease from Light Cloud Productions. In 2023, Josh finished his MFA theater practice with a focus on Indigenous playwriting. Josh was also recently honored with a MacEwan University Distinguished Alumni Award. Josh, welcome to What the Fringe.
Hi, thanks for having me. Oh, it's great being here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got connected because we're going to be performing at the Edmonton Fringe and found out recently we're going to be in the same venue, which I'm very excited about. And I always love to bring in like local artists, especially as I'm touring, onto the podcast, like to the Fringe, the local artists to the Fringe that I'm going to. And I was looking for different artists and I came across the title of your show. And my listeners know how I stalk people, not in a creepy way, but I found you. I was able to Google Elon Muskrat. I was like, that sounds funny. I wonder if this is the real name of the show. Because, you know, sometimes people just throw stuff in there. And it was. And then I found you and I was like, this guy's super cool. Like, he is doing all kinds of cool stuff. So, and thankfully you said, yeah, you'd be on the show. So here you are.
Yeah, here I am. Yeah, and just thanks for gently and politely stalking me. I feel like as artists, it just kind of goes with the territory sometimes. And yeah, like your podcast seems like a ton of fun, and I'm stoked to be featured on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it is fun. It's fun to see what other artists are up to. That's what, like, I'm like jonesing for the final list for Edmonton to come out so I can actually find people. Like, I've tried to find them based on the like lottery draw list, but like yourself, people put, you know, made up company names or made up show names, and, you know, it can be very difficult to find folks. So I like to see what's coming down the pipe, you know, and what kind of cool people I get to meet.
Yeah, there'll be so many cool people. I think the list goes out the end of this month, so you don't have too much longer to wait. I think the program's going to be up for sale and everything online.
Yes, so excited, so excited. Well, let's talk about you as an artist. I love, like, in your little forum, you wanted to talk about you being an Indigenous artist, and I really want to talk about that. So what does that mean to you as being an Indigenous artist, and what kind of responsibilities do you feel that you carry as an Indigenous artist?
Yeah, so like I discovered my love of being on stage when I was 6 years old. And I often say it's the high I've chased my whole life. And not just being on stage, but writing things or teaching things or curating things that speak to an audience. And in terms of being Indigenous, a big part of the ethos from which I operate, and to more or less the same extent still operate, growing up, I was the only Indigenous kid in every theater thing I was in. Like I grew up in St. Albert, and it's a very rich oil infused city, and we kept our indigeneity kind of in the house, and we always knew where we came from and who we were, but I never saw theater as a space I could bring that. And as I got older, thanks to some mentors and just kind of coming into myself, I learned to embrace my indigeneity in what I write and what I act, and acting ethoses, directing ethoses. And that just means knowing where I come from, the lands which I'm Indigenous to, which is Saugeen, like you mentioned. And it means recognizing that my ancestors were here before Canada, before the creation of, Western theater, quote unquote, as we know it. So I see the responsibility of my work as bringing Indigenous knowledge into spaces that we haven't really seen it. And Fringe has been a great place where I've been able to test some of that and play with some of that.
Thanks for sharing that. And then what do you feel like a responsibility to younger Indigenous artists? You do a lot of mentoring and teaching and really just involved in the community there where you live. And how do you do that? How do you instill kind of what you have learned to others?
Several different ways. Because, I've taught tons of kids, and I've recently, the last few years, spent a lot of time working with a lot of Indigenous kids on reserve in the city, kind of abroad, and just encouraging them that their voice matters, and encouraging them that the way they see the world is unique to them. And if they choose to pursue the arts in whatever form or fashion they want, they have a voice that is uniquely theirs, and they can tap into it and express it and bring it into these spaces. And I think another thing I've learned fairly recently that I'm offering them is joy. Not that kids aren't joyful, they're so joyful, but when I've met a handful of Indigenous kids, they can be quite reserved and quite shy and very, very, very like, who are you? Where are you coming from? And a lot of what I do is bring in play and joy just to get them laughing and get community building and helping them feel safe with me and safe with each other. And that to me is, I guess, another responsibility. It's generational healing, and it's, I see myself as kind of like a beacon that keeps Indigenous youth going forward.
That's really exciting. I'm like, can I come to you? Do you have any classes when I'm going to be at Edmonton? I just want to see that like in action. I love that. So as I was reading the long bio that you gave me,
it's like, Josh, calm down.
Oh, no, it's so great. There were a lot of stories. The titles made me feel like, oh, this is Indigenous art. And, every piece of work has an audience, right? And so what are some of the differences, I guess, if you're presenting artwork towards like just strictly Indigenous culture versus kind of this Western culture, non-Indigenous audiences? Like, I mean, I know art is what it is and we want it to honor whatever it is that we're doing, but I know there's like tweaks and different ways that we kind of perceive what we're doing if we're making art for one group of people versus another group of people.
Yeah, and I think that's the lens I operate from is like, I'm trying to bring Indigenous bodies, stories, knowledge, people onto the stage, but I'm also trying to do it in a way, for lack of a better term, is accessible to like other people. And by that, I mean, I'll talk about Rocco and Nakota, for example. So that's primarily a dialogue between a grandfather and a kid. And yes, they're both Indigenous and they talk about Indigenous things. But Nakota's journey in that story is overcoming anxiety, and Rocco's journey is like helping him find strength in moving through anxiety. And those are things anyone can relate to. And Civil Blood, a treaty story, which we did last summer here in Edmonton, that was very much a huge experiment in like having settler characters and Indigenous characters in a historical context, bash up into each other and have drama and have tension and kind of forecast what happens in Canadian society. But it's done in like a human way. I had to kind of get under the skin of, a priest. I had to get under the skin of a French colonial like leader. I had to get under the skin of an Indigenous Nehiyaw matriarch. So, trying to like find these real human beings and breathe life into them so anyone can see them and feel some sort of connection to them. So yeah, I try to write for everybody as much as I can, but still keeping the lens specific.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Have you written stuff that's specifically for Indigenous people? Like you're out somewhere where it's like just that community, or are you usually writing for kind of like broader community?
Broader in general, I would say Elon Muskrat is probably more for Indigenous people. And I don't want to alienate anybody from coming. Like, there's a lot of fist bumps I make towards, like, reserve communities with this show. That's kind of my first main endeavor into that, I'd say.
Well, that makes me want to see it even more. That sounds exciting. I love learning about like different cultures and seeing kind of like how you see the world. And like you said in your other plays, like anxiety, we all deal with that. And the beautiful thing about theater, the more specific we make it, right? The more specific you make it to your culture, sometimes the more universal it becomes to your audience. So you don't ever want to shy away from kind of who you are because it helps people connect.
Exactly. And I that's something I teach a lot to younger people. It's like, we can write whatever we want, but we have so much within us that we can draw from. And the more we can draw from that, the more authentic our stories and our characters and our performances are going to feel.
Yeah. When you were studying, you finished with a emphasis in Indigenous playwriting. Were there other Indigenous folks in your program that you were able to connect with, or were you still kind of doing that, feeling a bit like a lone wolf?
Bit like a lone wolf, but I certainly saw more of it. Like when I did my undergrad, which is actually in sociology, there was an Indigenous prof that kind of hopped around the department. There were like other Indigenous folks I saw on campus. When I did my teaching after degree, yeah, like I more so met a lot of Métis folks in my classes and kind of engaged with some Indigenous undergrads kind of around, not so much in the drama department, but, in other departments. And then when I did my MFA, like my advisor is the first Indigenous prof ever in the U of A's drama department. So there was him. And then we also had a buddy of mine, Denicho Thompson. He was a year above me. And he was kind of like the second out the gate, and I was the third. And as I was coming up, Ty Amy Grauman, who's a Métis writer, performer, she came up. So we had like a couple little Indigi peeps that we kind of hung out with. Even when I walk around campus now, I see more and more Indigenous students out there now, which I just think is great. And also, like university might not be a journey for a lot of those people, and that's okay too. Like they don't have to go there to get what they want out of life.
Absolutely believe that wholeheartedly. But it is also very encouraging that you had an Indigenous professor that is encouraging to others like, oh, here's a place I can go and I don't have to over-explain myself. I can feel understood within my art discipline. And I hope that just spurs more people on to pursue that.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I think it is. Like he's really been a lightning rod for people at the U of A and will continue to be. He knows exactly why he's there and what he's doing for people, and it's so important.
Well, and I'm sure too he is just bringing so much to all students, right? Not just the Indigenous students, but like his perspective as well. One thing when I was in graduate school that I learned was like it's not just nice to have perspectives from other cultures, like it's necessary. Like as us as humans, as artists, to experience other cultures, it's necessary to our growth because there are things that other cultures understand about life and humanity that we don't understand, like in a way that we don't understand, and we can gain so much from that.
Absolutely. I remember having some fantastic friendships, especially in my first undergrad of, people from Hindu faith and Mormon faith and all sorts of different circles of society. And I grew a lot just from sitting in class with them and being their friend. And them being my friend and getting to know one another. It's such a great little place where we can grow. It's not just the book smarts we learn at university. There's so much more.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about oral storytelling. That is something that is definitely a part of your heritage. And so what would you say are the defining characteristics of oral storytelling? Because there's storytellers out there, right? Like there's some great storytellers that I know, but I want to hear your perspective on what you think that means.
Yeah, I think it's all so intricately connected because, the essence of storytelling is just someone is in front of a person or a group of people and they're sharing a story. In terms of like Indigenous knowing and Indigenous knowledge, a lot of the oral storytelling traditions are about like reaffirming law or like reminding people of there was this big agreement that was made, tons and tons and tons of, cycles ago. So it's reflective, it's cohesive, but it's meant to like keep society together and keep the nation together and moving forward in a productive way. And sometimes they're just fun stories about like, how animals got this, or like just fun, wacky stories about animals doing crazy things to each other that's, are just meant to be silly or meant to just, keep the community in joy together. And in terms of theater, yeah, like, Fringe, as you probably know, is such a great haven for storytellers to travel. Again, I see them all as connected. Some storytellers that come to Fringe or tour the countries just have a really, really cool story to share. Some craft a narrative with a, social point that they want to get out to people. Some create clown characters that just get into mischief and spread joy and make people think a bit. And it all does the same thing to me. It gets people in a room and it gets them paying attention and thinking about something and reflecting on where they're at in society right now.
Yeah. Do you find with oral storytelling of like, we've got animals or there's like the stories you were saying kind of there with Indigenous culture, does it change from storyteller to storyteller, or is there like a really kind of hard and fast, if your father was teaching you a story and you were learning to retell it, he would go, oh, no, you say it like this or that. Like, how much creative freedom does each storyteller get?
That's a great question. And I think like it's so varied. And, there's some stories that are so sacred and have been told in such a specific way forever. And like, the elders or the knowledge keepers who know these stories, they eventually pass them down. And sometimes that can take a long and arduous time for people to learn the story and learn how to tell the story. And I think like every story, like all the little stories probably change from teller to teller. There's always that same essence. And even like between nations, like, different nations will tell a similar-ish story in completely different ways. Like I'm reminded of a story I've grown up with, how the Ravens stole the light, where like the Coast Salish have a version of that story. The Nehiyaw here in Alberta have a version of that story. Like there's so many different ways that story is told. And then in terms of like artistics and like theatrically telling stories, it's a bit of a gray area because like there are some stories that are meant to be told in ceremony and ceremony only. And I can't take those stories into a theater and do them unless I've had the protocol and I've been gifted that story. That's a big thing I've kind of learned in my time. A lot of what I've been doing lately is coming up with my own oral stories that involve an animal, but are completely like made up adventures from my own imagination. But it's kind of rooted in that tradition of like, this animal does this thing. There's nature. There's a spirit that talks to them. And, so that's where I think the artistic freedom can come from. It's a fine balance between the sacred and the creative.
That's really beautiful. Now I'm like interested in these stories that can't come out of like the sacred spaces. Is that something that outsiders can come and witness and listen and learn from, or is that kept kind of within the tribe and within the people?
That's a good question, and I think it depends on the circumstance. One story that's springing to mind is like the Treaty 6, the Nehiyaw creation story, which I've been told goes for multiple days. Like you sit and you listen for multiple days. And I think like for people to go to that, there is that invitation. People have to kind of know about it, and it becomes a community gathering and a community event that everybody goes to together. Typically, the really, really sacred stories, you have to go to ceremony and you have to, be welcomed into the nation and have protocol and have an elder be okay for you to sit with them. And I'm talking very, very generally, of course, like every nation is different and every elder is different.
It's a beautiful tradition. And there is that beauty of that connection, right? Of the fact that people could sit down for days to listen to a story is really a beautiful thing. And it's in that performative arts, right? I mean, people have been telling oral stories since the world began. All cultures have that. Some have lost it, but it's like it's the first form of theater.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. It's like theater as we know it has existed long before theater as we know it. It's the idea of a storyteller and a captive audience or a captive witness.
That's so good. Well, what draws you to Fringe? Why bring your stories to Fringe and not just kind of there in your community? There's a thriving theater community there in the Edmonton area.
Fringe is a great place to test stuff. And it's a great place to get noticed and get people's eyes on your work. I think it's the risk that intrigues me the most, particularly at the Edmonton Fringe. There's a very, very dedicated audience base. Like people take days off work, a week off work to go and just hang out at the Fringe and see a bunch of shows. Maybe there's some childhood excitement there because I remember when I was 18, I just was about to graduate high school and I had a group of friends and we're like, let's try writing a play together. Like we feel ready to challenge ourselves that way and to collaborate. And the only thing we knew where we could do that at 17, 18 years old was the Edmonton Fringe. So like we applied, got in, and Fringe has always been a place for me, as young as 18, as a place to try stuff out, to try out new ideas, to just be swept into the community for a little while. And this show in particular, like I've been developing a series of solo shows for me to perform wherever I can perform them. Fringe was hugely instrumental in, launching Rocco and Dakota, which became pretty successful for me. And I'm hoping I can follow a similar-ish process. Like this Fringe is a great place to test out this draft and see how people respond to it. And then after the Fringe is done, I'll go back to the drawing board, make my tweaks, make my edits, decide if I want to keep continuing doing the show or chuck it out or put it in a drawer for now. But if I do want to continue it, then yeah, Fringe is a great space to tour as well. The CAF lottery and going across the country. It's a great place to just get your work noticed as an artist and to travel. Like who doesn't love to travel?
Right? Oh, it's great. And go meet people. So much fun. Well, let's talk about Elon Muskrat. Okay, here's the loaded question of the day. What inspired the show? Tell me.
So there's two and a half, kind of three things that inspired the show. The first is there's a fellow out here named Ron Walker. I was doing a lot of work with Ron's child, hiring them for some just stuff that I was doing in theater. And Ron and I just became really good buddies through that. And he actually directed a play reading of mine. And during that process, he was like, it'd be really funny if you did a show called Elon Muskrat. And I just peed my pants laughing because I thought that was so funny. And I was like, yeah, funny name, but wacky idea. What the heck would I do with that? And then I started thinking about it and paying attention to what's going out in the world and is continuing to go on in the world. And just these bells started going off. And it's like, okay, maybe I can do something with that title. And maybe it's something satirical and something cheeky. And that was enough of an impulse to start carrying it forward and start doing some writing around it. So that's one source of inspiration. The other source of inspiration is kind of a side tangential project. In grad school, one of the things I started experimenting with is this character named Amig. I wrote a series of oral stories about a character named Amig, this little rodent creature who he's young, he's wide-eyed, he's excited, and he goes around fixing dams and helping his crow friend. And one night he gets kidnapped and wakes up in a school and doesn't know why he's there and then leaves. And in another story loses his tail. And as he gains his confidence back, his tail grows back. And it's like, well, these are some interesting things that I don't know what to do with yet. So I started working on this other solo show called A Mig Tales, which I was supposed to do this year, and it didn't end up happening. But I took a look at this huge arsenal of A Mig stories. A Mig Tales was supposed to be a kid show, but there was a couple stories that didn't really seem kid-friendly, but also like had a bit more of a mature edge to them. So I kind of took those, and as I was plunking around with Elon Muskrat, I found this interesting like oral storytelling handoff between a couple of these Amig tales and this character of Elon Muskrat. And I don't want to give away a ton about that right now, but it helped me find the framework of the show, and it gave it an interesting edge and an interesting heart that I wasn't anticipating. And I guess the 0.5 thing and the third thing is, all the crap that's going on in the world with like billionaires trying to take over the world and, successfully taking over the world and just the stupidity that comes from that. There's so much to make fun of. There was actually a time where I almost wasn't going to do this show and pulled it because Elon Musk was becoming such a controversial character. And luckily, he's kind of like pulled out of the spotlight a bit, and now there's worse stuff to worry about. Just paying attention to all the stuff that's going on with him and all these other wealthy people. There's satire in there that I'm playing with in this show.
That's going to be super fun. So what are you hoping audiences will walk away with after seeing Elon Muskrat? Like, I'm sure it's multi-layered.
Yeah. One thing I really, really, really want people to walk away from and walk away with is joy. This is a very satirical script. It's very tongue-in-cheek. There's a lot of like really wacky and silly things I've written into it. A couple songs that may or may not appear in this show. And I'm hoping that level of joy and that level of octane, I'm hoping people will just enjoy that and embrace the wackiness and the edge that I have in this show. And I think I do want people to walk away thinking about the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, and like responsibilities connected to that.
I love that you started with joy, because I would, and it being a satire and just so many difficult things that are happening in our world right now. And the fact that you want people to walk away with joy, like, wow, that is a hard task to answer. Right?
Yeah, I think so. And like, we need to laugh. And I see that more than ever. And, as a writer, I tend to err more on the side of like, I love a good tragedy. I love a good sob story. I love making people feel things on such a deep level. This show just, it's taken the shape of just joy and silliness and goofiness. And in a sense that like, I want people to like, enjoy watching me play this villain and play this heel. And I want to keep enjoying bringing this like mean and like manipulative character to life. And, I'm hoping people can go like cringe as much as laugh along with this character.
Okay. Can you tell me about, I mean, I know we're keeping some things under wraps and I will honor that, but costume. Are we going literal? Are we going tease to a muskrat? Like what can we expect?
My team and I have joked that I would just have a little tail underneath a suit jacket. That's not actually happening. No, my costume designer, she's actually like a super well-known Indigenous fashion designer in these lands here. And she's like, I want to try designing for theater. So I've kind of, agreed that let's have you try this show. So what she's come up with for this character, and this may mean nothing to you, it may mean everything to you. She's thinking like chief and band council, like greasy slicked back hair into a ponytail, a giant beaded medallion, one of those like bow ties, and like vaguely Western wear. I know you've seen people like this, like on like that like almost cowboy looking councilmen.
And I hope she puts a tail on the costume there.
Can you build me a beaded muskrat tail?
Well, are you going to will the costume be enough? Like you could wear that out as you are kind of marketing your show there in Edmonton? Like, would you go out in costume or?
I would do it, but I'd have to be in character and keep it PG, of course. But I'd be curious how that would go. Maybe I'll try it. We'll see.
Yeah, because you don't want to not be in character for sure. Would you wear a little name tag that says Elon Muskrat?
Probably. Or it's too bad. If I could somehow get a beaded medallion made that says his name, that would be great. Or I know some people carry, backpacks with a big poster sticking out of it. I like the idea of a name tag though, like that. That seems very him.
I'm going to meet you, and it's like this little handwritten name tag, and
one of those corporate icebreaker name tags.
That's so you can interact with people, right? Is do a corporate icebreaker.
Just in the middle of the Fringe grounds.
I'm a marketing genius.
Can you be my marketing person forever?
I feel like I can make stuff up for other people, but not for myself. So that would be funny. Would you carry a chainsaw around? You should get a kid's, like a plastic kids one,
That's the exact kind I'm going to bring on stage with me. One of those crappy, Fisher Price ones.
All right. Well, we are getting close to the end. So I'm going to ask you the dreaded question of what has been your most interesting or awkward Fringe interaction? Share us a good story.
I actually have a really good one. And it's not awkward at all, but for maybe a half second, it was awkward in a sense that I was completely caught off guard. And then it became just a really, really, really beautiful thing. So back in 2018, the one other time I've toured the calf lottery, and I was touring Rocco and Nakota, I was in my second last stop, which is in Victoria Fringe. Had a ton of fun in Victoria Fringe. And not every Fringe does this, but some Fringe has awards. And so there was an awards night. And I was like, well, I'm not expecting to win anything, but I'll go and just socialize and mingle. And I literally had just gotten there. And at the time, I didn't know anyone in Victoria. But I show up, I get a beer, I go hang out. And then I have 6 or 7 people kind of back me into a corner. And they were like, so we want to introduce ourselves. We're the Rocco and Nakota fans. And I was like, pardon me? And they were like, yeah, we've been following your journey across Canada, and we've seen your show, and we just think it's beautiful and wonderful, and you're such a great performer, and we really, really believe in your work and this story. And it totally caught me off guard and flipped me sideways. Even as I say it now, I still think it's unbelievable. And yeah, didn't win any awards, and I wasn't expecting to. But this group swarmed me again and was like, this is not fair. We're going to revolt and fight the cause for you. I was just so grateful and just so touched by that. And that's something I'm going to keep with me forever. And, where else can that happen but at Fringe?
Right. Because, you don't always get to interact with your audience. And that's the beauty of Fringe, right? Is that they get to meet you and see you out and about and oogle over you and revolt when you're not awarded something.
By that point, when they said they were going to revolt, by that point, I think I was on beer 3 and I was like, oh, do what you want to do.
Oh, that's another thing. You could get a bunch of your friends to support Elon Muskrat as you're out, walking around with your chainsaw, and they're like, Elon Muskrat.
I have some friends who would do that. I got to start calling in some favors.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining me today on What the Fringe. It has been a pure delight to talk to you.
Oh, me too. This has been great, fantastically energizing part of my day and my week. So yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for reaching out, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Josh is going to be performing Elon Muskrat at the Edmonton Fringe Festival this August. You can learn more about Josh on his website, joshlongdo.com, and you can keep up with him on Instagram at Josh Longdo and on Facebook and LinkedIn at Josh Longdo. Those will all be linked in the show notes. What the Fringe is produced and hosted by me, Lauren Hantz, and this episode was edited by Ben Ellis of Renowned Media. Those sweet tunes you hear are provided by Paul Snyder of Orchestra of Sound, and our logo was designed by Ruby Arnold of Ruby Makes Things. What the Fringe can be found on your favorite podcast platforms and now on YouTube. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know when new episodes release. And keep up with What the Fringe on Instagram at whatthefringe_productions, and find us online at whatthefringeproductions.com.
You know, the guy that is running my country right now says a lot of stuff, and for a while it would really surprise me, but now just nothing that flies out of his mouth surprises me. And now that he has dubbed himself the board chairman of the Kennedy Center, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if one day he tweeted a mandate to the creatives there.
It'd be really funny if you did a show called Elon Muskrat.